All right. So I do apologize that this is not going to be live, but we're going to talk about the strategy for Worldly Counsel at Pro Tour Laurel and Eclipsed. I'm just like traveling, and it's a little hard to get this done live, and a little worried. And obviously, there's a spotlight in Toronto coming up, so I want to make sure this is out by then. Um, Plus, we did record actually the team meeting for limited at the house, but I was a little concerned with two things before we get started. The first one is the audio quality was decent, but there were a lot of cuts because of questions and they didn't come through, so that it would have made not for the best listen. But the more important one is, and this is going to come through, is the strategy we had for this pro tour I think was good in terms of the ceiling. So if you are a very good limited player and drafter, um, I think the strategy speaks a lot to you. I know this because I faced Tony, who ended up in the finals in draft, and he had drafted effectively the way we've set it out in our limited presentation. So for the high end, it's good, but for the kind of if you're like if you enjoy limited, but you're not like maybe like truly like really highly skilled at draft, or you're struggling in some spots, I think take the presentation I'm gonna do, especially the main one, with grains of salt. Consider essentially before we get started that there is nothing wrong with taking a card in a type, like a strong elf card, a strong merfolk card, and just running with it. There is nothing wrong with it. You also need to 3-0 your draft at a tournament like the Spotlight or a limited qualifier. So like you kind of need to high roll all in a way, anyways. So like there's nothing wrong with just going with it, right? Like the difference between for you between going, in single elimination 0-1, 1-1, or 2-1, like zero roughly, or whereas like you just need the free. So I will present this to you, I think, from the perspective of leveling up, understanding, but we've had free drafters in our team, so for sure the strategy, but we've had the same number of trophy drafters too. So the floor was not as protected as it was in previous pro tours, so that's something I'm going to work on in the future. But the ceiling is there, so the strategy is still very good. I think if, again, you are a high level drafter, understand, like are capable of staying open as late as something like pack 2, pick 7, or pick 8. So we'll go into it, and I hope regardless of that you enjoy it. So this should be around an hour of your time. And again, yeah, we'll just do our best. And sorry for the quality of the mic and all that. We're gonna get it done. Okay, so the preliminary content. This set came in hot. Like, I'm presenting this limited content 3 days or barely after set release on Arena. So it's pretty straightforward. But like the idea is that like I want to make sure that the team is aware of the week 0 metagame. That's the whole purpose of the preliminary content, is what is the metagame going into preparation, right? Because we need to beat the metagame. So I give a mission statement. In this case, it was understanding the mountain. I could use John Avon's art. That was great. But we'll get into what that actually means. But the big thing for me was looking at kind of the cards that are performing well, or the critical mass aspect, right? Like each card you play helps the next card be better. And that's also why removal is reasonable in Lorwyn, by the way, but not like the best thing you could do. It's because removal reduces the critical mass component from your opponent, but it doesn't develop your own. So the best thing to do is to develop critical mass, but the second best thing to do is to prevent critical mass, if that makes sense. So again, this how the set works is very early. This is just from a metagame perspective. I'm giving you this. Don't take this advice. I'm going to skip through it. But basically, when the metagame was out, right, like the 4 big types were the big thing. Goblins was only so-so, uh, but it was really about going on board, generating an advantage over time. And frankly, this is like I call this a very good Elvish Visionary set, right? Like the Eclipse cards are very strong. Kohlraff Zealot's very strong. So all these cards are like draw cards, are very, very powerful. Um, so that's the important part. But again, I was warning the team that data was going to shift heavily. So I'll skip the color strength and draft. You can always look at this since Santine Land's less useful here. Circovitz actually gave the best summary view. But this is why I was talking about the mountain, is you have those top 4 archetypes, right? Which were elves, Kifkin, merfolk, and elementals as we were coming out of the week 0 metagame. that are much better than the next 6. Right. But the question is like how much fertile ground is there on the rest, right? That's like where equity can be gained. So then I had to find cards from each archetype. This was like week 3. I'm gonna skip these really quickly because it's gonna update for the next slide. So I'm just gonna go quickly, but just give you a couple of seconds on each so you can see like the kind of thing I highlighted. Els was interesting because of the depth, right? So it made sense that more people were drafting Els because it was such a deep archetype. And that's why, like, compared to the other archetypes, as the metagame progressed, it was like performing well. Um, Elementals was kind of interesting as well. We'll dive into it, but like again, a super deep archetype. And then Goblins was there were a lot of overrated rares and uncommons in the set. And the big thing for Goblins was telling the team you should try Goblins if you get one of these rares or these uncommons late. Um, Technically, I should have put the 2 free Death Toucher and the Boggart enchantment. I think that would have been okay. And to be honest with the team, I was probably a little too strong here. So the team didn't end out drafting Goblins at the start, which I thought was a mistake. So that's a thing from a review for our team. Draft communication wise, they trust me, but like it's getting to the point where I have to be very, very careful with how I phrase or develop concepts, especially in the preliminary section. I think with the Pro Tour, it's fine to be a little stronger because, we're going into a competition. So there's a much more strict criteria of like, don't do this at the Pro Tour is probably correct. But the problem here, by being stricter in preliminary, is that they perceive that they shouldn't draft goblins, when in fact they should. We should know what it would look like. We should understand how the metagame develops and how to make that deck work, right, if you start with these rares. So that was like maybe something to develop. And we'll get into the archetypes. It's totally fine to draft. It's just a lot of people overrated a lot of the bad commons, basically. So, and uncommons. Then we talked about, archetypes we wanted to discover. So one big thing for me was this red midrange package, Kolrav Zealot, Flamekin Guildweaver, and Cinderstrike. Kind of goes into everything was the idea. Really nice, really efficient. I really liked actually like the idea of this generically, but as an exploration mechanism. Talked about Treefolk because the Reaping Willow specifically was a star uncommon in this. We were looking at Doran as well. So there was a question here about the shell with the Treefolk. And then other archetypes, what does the blue green style base look? What does the Demir style base look at? Like what's what's the Timir Vividish package, right? So then I, highlight them on colorless cards, like where to kind of have them because they can be a little harder to align in drafts, right? So I kind of highlight the colorless cards at this stage what should be done. And then as always, like single cards, right? Like so Bray of Clown Stararm represents a bunch of rares that aren't about anything that the set really is about, but are clearly powerful cards. So how do we make those work? Conditional vivid payoffs like Shimmer Creep was a good example. Kif Keeper also aligns here. And then Doran Besieged by Time, which we kind of figured out in the first draft is really strong. And if you're in one of the weight pairs that can have it, it's great. But also things like Bloodline Bidding, single card strategy style stuff. So I give them these objectives, right? What were the dynamics of the draft format with fewer available archetypes, identifying when and how to deviate into secondary archetypes, thinking, about those primary black and red starts, because if you think that Goblins is weaker, right, let's say you open a good black or red card to get past some, but that they aren't the Goblin power cards, then like what does that look like? Also, of course, well, if there's 4 archetypes, what does that look like in a way of, well, they're being fought over, I suspect. So what do the drafts look like? And then, what the non-typo builds look around like, especially something like Vivid with those rares and mythics, and keeping up to date. So that was like kind of the preliminary that we set. So as the drafts went on, as usual, there were some experiments. People tried different things. The interesting one was that Els was supremely overdrafted, which kind of is the first thing you do anyways. If you looked at data, would probably indeed be to overdraft Els. It's the week 1 meta, going from week 0 to week 1. I suspected that's what a lot of people might do. The archetype's deep, high win rate on the card. So obviously, like at the house, it was massively overdrafted. hugely so. But as a result, the elf decks weren't performing as well, right? That's normal. What's interesting to me from that spot is that we basically saw that the decks that were doing well were really kind of those elemental shells. So Merfolk can have some issues against the elf decks as a matchup problem, depending on the cards you get. But the elemental shells, right? If like everybody's fighting over green and black cards, well, this mid-range red shell is doing well. So we really started liking the kind of elemental draft decks and started discovering other archetypes. So in that context, I'm presenting you the actual presentation. I know this is 10 minutes, but it's super important to understand the context of where we're coming from. That we didn't really draft goblins much as a team, which I think was a shame, honestly. But again, that's a lesson for me to learn and do. From context here, right? Also, we're in the middle of the path. At the Pro Tour, again, our performance was, around 55%, which is lower than what we normally have. But like, our win rate for day 2 was strong, and we had the same number of trophies. So again, it was the main issue was not having a floor strategy. So I'm repeating it again. Before you look at this, there is nothing wrong with opening a strong typal card and just running away with it and just hoping for the best. You probably need to free out your draft, maybe twice. There's nothing wrong with doing that if you are not comfortable drafting open until pack 2, pick 8. Okay, in that context, let's present. So, as usual, I give a mission statement here, which for me was shining a light in the darkness, right? So, one of the difficulties when we were drafting was realizing, late in pack 2, you were getting some unbelievably powerful cards, but that just couldn't fit in, right? Like, so they would go around the table, which is kind of normal in this kind of set, right? Where like the types are so strong and the archetypes are so defined. Something like the Merfolk Uncommon Lord, which is one of the better, like probably top 5 uncommons in the set, given that you play it in the right deck, but literally has no home outside of it, right? So you're getting, if no one's in Merfolk, it has no value. So it goes pack 2, 6, 7, 8, and the thing is, when do you get that information? So for me, it was like, it was thinking about it from that context and trying to explain it from that context of like, okay, how do I get the team to comprehend this concept of they're getting the card late? It's like, well, you're going to be in the dark, honestly, but then this light's going to come through and tell you what you should be picking up. But that can lead to difficulty. So from there, we go back to the basics, right? Normally I have a better format definer, but like, honestly, the archetypes having a 10, like, 5 or 10 to 1 ratio between played and unplayed is such a high delta that kind of defines what's going on. Then I talk about color strength and draft. This is 17 lands information, which you can look at. The big thing is how basically the types are ahead and the other archetypes are not. But there's no like S tier archetype, right? I only gave 1A to elves, which implies that honestly, there's not really something to push for so strongly that you should forego anything else. Yeah, so again, this one, I was maybe on crunch time and use a more generic graphic, but with Laura, and we do what we do. So I talk about how the set works, which is the first time I actually divided this slide in two because of the difficulty in communication I felt. So it was at the set's limitation, right? You're going to having cohesion in your drafts. You're going to have people fighting over for the best archetypes. And a bunch of cards require you to be in a specific lane, right? Like, let's talk about Eclipse Marrow. At the Pro Tour, I got that P1, P5, I think, maybe P4. But like, if you're not in Merfolk, it has no value, or very little value. I've splashed it at the house, and like an Elementals deck, basically like triple blue. It comes super late because I had like a Champions of the Shoal, but like it's much, much, much worse, right? So that's one of the things, right? You need to be in a specific lane to power up these cards. So some players are just going to go down the lanes. They're going to open a Tristan's command, and nothing you're going to do is going to remove them from the Elves archetype. There's no way you're cutting them off, right? So that happens. And now the thing is, one other thing that's interesting is that because the cards are so insular, before in prior sets, I'd be like, pack 1, you should take these cards because they give you the option to be open. But you can't, Evolving Wilds isn't a card that leaves you open, right? Splashing is negative equity in this set. And the cards are so specific. Like, let's say you're in Goblins, right? Like, how easy is it to splash most Elves cards? Like, maybe Tristan's Command you would because it's so strong, but I mean, let's talk about like the Green Elf Champion. Can you really splash that in most cases? Like, I mean, it's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's hard. So that leaves like this really difficult spot, right? So it's this difficult mana. It's the insular card, so it's really hard to go off script. And I think if, again, I'm repeating myself a lot, I just don't want you to have that O3 disaster. It is totally fine in Lorwyn to go on script. There is nothing wrong with going, I am in Elves and I'm going to draft Elves. It might not work out, right? You might have 3 people at the table who are in it. If you have the right cards and if you believe, you can go for it. It's just a question of how comfortable you feel being open till pack 2, pick 8. And that's a really, really difficult strategy. Yeah, anyways, repeating that. So eventually the closed lanes drafts, right? You're left at the mercy of the table, because if you're in Merfolk and there was only one Merfolk drafter, like let's say you started early, right, with a Merfolk Lord and you're like, I'm just going to be Merfolk. If you're the only one, great. But if 2 other people have the same idea, you're doomed. And the thing, right, is again, there's these open lanes with cards that are 65% plus win rate or around that, and that's insane. Like, getting like pick 7 or pick 8 a card with and even above a 60% win rate is already a huge win. So like getting them like that late and that freely, like that's the thing. For me, this set at a high level, like even higher than the Pro Tour almost, is about maxing opportunities. It's about finding those options that hit that ceiling, but that only one archetype can play, and to be as open as possible to make these worthwhile, right? So you have to, these table dynamics are going to dictate which of the most powerful cards you have access to far above your specific seat. And that was one of the things when we were testing at the house. We realized your specific seat has some merit, but one key draft for me was we had 2 blue-red elementals players side by side, or 2 elf decks side by side. And the truth was, their success wasn't the player passing to me was in this archetype. That didn't stop them from succeeding. What stopped them was if other people at the table were. It was a critical mass, right? 4 people were in elves, so we didn't see anything. Or we were the only 2 in blue-red elementals, so while, yes, I got the second best card for the archetype, the second best card was still more than enough. So that's the thing, right? Is it was really about that table dynamic. I broke it because it's kind of a difficult strategy, so try to do it. Bonus points, I guess, for taking collar pairs that don't really work. Treefolk was fine, but for me as well, this is a definer to me of the set. This Crossroads Watcher and Dawn's Light Archer. If you looked at these cards out of context, you'd just be like, they're green, they're free drops in green, and they have some different text, right? Yet in Elves, the Light Archer is good, and the Crossroads Watcher is not playable. And if you reverse it to Green White Kifkin or Gruul, the Watcher is fantastic, and the Light Archer is barely playable. They are creatures in the same color at the same rarity that both have potential, but they literally don't mix. There's not really an archetype where you want both of these cards in. And that's like a really, really important key of the set, is how distinct the cards are in power level per archetype. All right, so then I moved in on the pod draft metagame, right? You open pack 1. The thing is, some players get the right card, they go the lane. Some others will keep searching. So the thing is, pack 1 is going to end up dry quickly, right? That's the same almost in any set. Just presume at a high level that pack 1 is going to be bad, because people are drafting without context, so they're not giving you stuff that's good for free late because they're taking it for themselves. So that's what's going on. Now, packs 5 to 8 might express an archetype being available at the table. So again, my second Pro Tour draft was the same as a lot of drafts that I saw at the house. Was in the sense of I got Eclipse Marrow, pick 5, and then I got I can't remember the order, but for example, the 4 free that made a set treasure pick 6, or Kulravzil at pick 7. So I knew like where like blue was probably going to be open-ish. And the elementals or the Merfolk archetype were going to be open-ish, right? Because I got these picks 5 to 8, and that expressed to me what archetype was probably going to be open to me at the table. Now in my case, I opened Ashlyn's Command pack 2 pick 1, so pretty much locked. But I was confident I'd have a full deck. Uh, and one important thing too, for you, is I use percentages from a international communication perspective, right? I have people from all over the world, so I use numbers often to. I One important concept of why we use 17 lands isn't, there's a view of it being card evaluation, which isn't untrue, of course, but it's about communication. If I use the terms, this card is good, great, bomb, all this stuff, right? It can be fine. But the big thing for me is that people will understand those terms differently depending on where they come from and other concepts. And I don't want those errors in communication. So I used here +3, +6, +10. So that's like the improvement when drawn. Which does favor blue, but it was less in the set. That's a different discussion. Basically saying, like that was to me the difference between good, great, and bomb is, when you have a card that's good, then that's okay, but you're not going to like lock the archetype. If you have a card that's great, you're favoring it. And if you have a card that's a bomb, like a +10, like one of the high end command, like the good commands, right? Then yeah, you should really look to lock that. So you need to be familiar on those differences, you as a player, because you need to know what to defend. Defending a card that's good is not worth your time, right? And it can put you in a dangerous position. Defending a card that's great is worthwhile, but you have to accept reality at some point if the things don't pan out. And if a card is exceptional, though, it is worth defending till the end because the equity from that one card is so high that you kind of have to go with it. Something like a Figure of Fable also qualifies here. And here's the thing, right? Staying open does require very specific cards. We're going to go into that if you do want to have like the advanced strategy. But if I give it equal equity on cards, you should always take the one that has the most flexibility. And that's for me the leverage, is that deep knowledge of cards that enable open lanes in the middle of packs in order to gain the best opportunity equity, and making sure to only lock once the lane is secure and or worth pursuing. And that, like in less coded language, basically means you need to be open till pack 2, pick 8, and that can be really, really difficult. So as a result, again, there's no shame at all in sticking with the type. If you feel like waiting until pack 2, pick 8 to decide what to do just isn't something that you can accomplish. There's no shame in it. It's difficult. And like even at the Pro Tour, testing with a team that's exceptional, in my opinion, limited, we're very good. We had teammates who couldn't do it, and that's on me. That's not on them. That's on me because I should have been able to identify a high floor strategy that they could have gone with. So like as a learning for our future processes, I will be considering, because we've always had this high floor strategy kind of innately. But I will be doing it as a checklist to go, what is the floor on this strategy? And if it's too low, I will propose an alternative strategy that gives them that equity. So anyways, we go into pod draft dynamics and positioning. Players' first picks will determine if their approach is open or closed. Awareness is important, right? My belief was people at the Pro Tour would misassess these situations. That's normal. Like, it leads to strange dynamics sometimes, but you can check how cards wheel to have an idea of what's going on. For me, I put the archetype for goblins as weaker. That's not actually totally true. What I actually meant, what I should have put is less likely to exist. Like you need more rares, uncommons. It's not like randomly filled with commons. But black and red cards should be less contested overall, except Elves pulls black cards strongly. So if you're the open lane drafter, right, you got something that doesn't tell you to just do a thing. For me, there was a high chance you ended up in red, right? Because you get the 4 free trample that makes a treasure, Kulrav Zealot, removal spells in red. Red is a relatively deep color. So especially in elementals. So it makes sense to me to lean in it. You might also lean towards elves because the cards are generically powerful, so in green. But at least for me, knowledgeable players in a few spots, right? You stand your ground and fill out what you had. So that's if you have one of the best. You self-fill up your archetype, but allow for pivoting. That's for me the cards that are great. And then if you are in that second position or not, you take cards that cross archetypes, and that gives you the highest chances to branch. And the thing, right, is unless you should lock your position, and locking your position is a determination of the cards you have, or the comfort you have with being open, but you need time to understand table signals, right? Like the more time you give yourself a chance to understand what's going on at your table, the higher your win rate equity will be. You do have to though be merciless in your picks. If you're being open, like you're gonna have to take as many playables as fast as possible to and make it work. So like you have to be really merciless in what you're doing. An example I gave, as usual, is this positioning example. So for people who wanted to soft force an archetype, so for example, semi-forcing red, right? Some teammates were more comfortable with the elemental red mid-range clusters. So, you know, I gave them that they would, given nothing in the pack, take the elemental red card, reasonable red removal, maybe some blue or goblin card that makes sense with it, opening themselves for the Gruul, Teamer style archetypes, which we'll delve into. And basically, take the best card, but if you have to split, take the best UR/BR card. And make sure that you're reading signals and still taking opportunities if they tell you to go elsewhere. But the other archetypes are really when they're best of the best. So this isn't like something I 100% recommend. It's more if you're more comfortable with like the red mid-range archetype to do this, right? It does mean that these drafters would very rarely be in white, implicitly. So yeah, that was like what I basically ended up instructing the team on. Like how patience is the key, which I still believe at a very high level is correct, but is a very difficult strategy to pull off. And yeah, so from here, we're going to go into more like detail. So engineering card flow is cards that help dig through your deck, get to your best cards. So they're here for reference if you want to pause and check them. Uh, the big thing for me from a strategic perspective, right, is when you're reading table signals, going dark for me is like you kind of have to just lock. You know what's going on, so you just take things. Um, so you're first when you start the draft, right, you're trying to gain information as to what you should be doing. And unfortunately, in this set, the gaining information is quite late. So that's why I use the sunset image here. So then I use this gold border. So this is not so important in this slide. It'll become more. I split the archetypes in two portions. The cards that are universally good, like cards that work in any archetype, and the cards that are just good in that archetype. And the reason I do this is to say basically pack one, take the cards with this orange border over the other stuff, and then packs 2 and 3 take what's best for your archetype, right? So cards I really like, the hybrid cards that are good, like Marrow Sky Swimmer, obviously the rares, Abigail and Sonar are great to start with. They open so many archetypes. Gathering Stone's fantastic. Obviously the Mythic's unbelievable. And I really like Rooftop Percher. It's a card that works in a lot of archetypes. It's a great top end card. It's the glue to a ton of decks. So like I really like picking it up pack one. Because then also you have it. So if you open a champion and they're like not in the archetype, yeah, it's not as strong, but you can maybe make it work. All right. Then we'll look into it. So I put the stress here because Merfolk specifically has a lower number of cards that are specifically cards you want in Merfolk. So Merfolk is an archetype that if it's fought over can be really, really bad. So you don't want to fight over Merfolk typically. You want to be here because you're the one drafter at the table with it. That said, the Merfolk specific cards are extremely strong. I think Wonderbrine Trapper technically works also in Kifkin. It's quite good there. But again, I separate these right in two. So you have the cards that are good everywhere in orange and the cards that are just for the archetype in transparent. I'm gonna go a little faster over these. If you are using this for your reference, no problem with pausing for you. Kifkin, again, we're looking, I mean, Fought Left in View is perfect example of card that only really works in Kifkin. And on the other side, though, when you look at it, those green and white cards are generically quite powerful, right? Rooftop Percher, the Kifkin decks don't actually have that much top end. So, like, the top end you want is Metal Council, but, like, sometimes you just need to get damage through, and flyers are quite good in this set. And Kifkin happens to not actually have that many of them. So, Rooftop Percher is really excellent, actually, in Kifkin. Elves, frankly, in these two positions, technically nameless inversions fine in goblins, but but that's again a separation that makes sense, right? Generically powerful cards in orange, elf powerful cards in normal. Elementals was one archetype that had a lot of generically powerful cards. This is where the red mid-range package comes in. But even then, like, honestly, this might be my favorite type of the Bane 4. It's the one that people don't really look at too much, and it's just really powerful. Like, you still have a lot of power, and a lot of these cards, like Zealot and Flame Killing Guildweaver, just come late. So, I mean, even at the Pro Tour, it happened. I, yeah, I think these cards are just generically undervalued. Goblins, right? This time I had the opportunity to finally highlight the uncommons. I had to reteach the team a bit about the archetype. But it's basically the good rares, the best uncommons, and like making sure that your commons are the best things available, right? Like you don't want the one free, the two one frees, the glutton in red and the one free black creature that whenever you attack you give +1/+0 to a goblin are pretty reasonable. I really like the black creature actually as a filler common. It's pretty good. But you really just want the removal, right? Or the card advantage creatures, Reaping Willow, Chloraphyll. Then I talk about the other archetypes. I say Treefolk is a low equity archetype, not because it's bad or that you shouldn't go into it. It's more a question of it's really hard to be in a position where it's correct to be in it. But Doran is one, Reaping Willow is one. You also get to play cards that nobody else wants, like Requiting Hex, Spiral into Solitude, Gut Splitter Gang, right? It's just these combos of these blight cards with the cards that remove counters for card advantage, right? Pretty straightforwardly. And this actually was important for me. At the house, I had the real problem of people talking about the Vivid deck, right? They're talking about the Vivid archetype, the Vivid deck, and unlike a lot of other times where like a mechanic I would be able to sidestep or find another way to describe it. I was stuck on this one. This one was really hard. I can't. This realization really came on Tuesday. Working in the content was going. How do I explain? Because they're excited about Vivid, right? They see the upside, right? And that makes sense. Wizards designing these cards so that you're excited about them. So of course you're going to see the upside, right? You're not. And I was actually thinking about it more and more and more, and eventually it came to the realization the way I can present it is that Vivid is a drawback, right? If you think of Silvergill Mentor, like Behold a Merfolk, right, to make a 1/1, Vivid isn't dissimilar to that. Vivid, what it says, frankly, is to make this card work, you have to play some other stuff, right? The Vivid cards specifically literally say this card on its own is not good. That's exactly what the card says. It's this card is not good on its own. So it's a drawback. Anytime you see a card with Vivid, it's a drawback. So obviously there are powerful cards in Magic's history that have drawbacks, but like once you see it as a drawback, it. I hope it starts making sense as to what you should be trying to accomplish. And I do it before we go into these salvage archetypes because for Gruul, for example, I look at something like Shimmerwild's Growth, and you might be like, oh, Gruul has to be this deck that has expensive cards, wants to accelerate Vivid. And it's not. It's a mid-range fatties deck. That's why Lumen Lost works. In it, it's not because it's Vivid's a drawback, but what you want is a Death Touch body. The 2/4 is actually what you want in Gruul. It fights well, it punches well. Surly Farrier, a card that is very mediocre, kind of everywhere. Actually, quite good in Gruul. Because the vigilance component is the one this is one of the decks that benefits the most from it. So and obviously with Flame Kid, Guildweaver, Chloraphyll, Nuggle Robber, this archetype can easily splash something too, if it makes sense, right? But that can power up a Prisma Basher. Like there's a lot of options. I thought the most interesting one is that Cinder Strike doesn't perform well in Gruul, and I think it's because the equity from playing Gruul is that you have a bunch of X free creatures, like 3 freeze, 4 freeze. So Cinder Strike specifically, turning your X3 into an X2 is quite bad if you need to kill something big. But a lot of your card advantage comes from like making your opponent's 2/2s quite weak, right? You get virtual card advantage because you have a free and your opponent has 2/2s. So Cinder Strike doesn't help in that spot. That was actually an interesting discovery. But it's good salvage equity for this archetype. And then there's Soup. So typically these decks are teamer, but there can be other things. This is where Puka's Eye really shines, by the way. These Soup decks, it's like one of the top uncommons in the archetype, if you are there. Otherwise, I really like Foraging Wickermaw a lot in general, but like here it's great. Kif Keeper, and to a degree, the black one, the vivid one, shine the most in these soup decks, right? Like you've solved their drawback problem. And then obviously, like this is where Great Force Druid is nice. It's bad in the other green archetypes, but here it shines really quite hard. But again, you're going here because you started with the good cards like Prodigy, Noggle Rubber, Miss Meadow Council, and maybe you get a late Puka's Eye that opens up the archetype to you. Then I reminded the team on the mid-range package. Cinder Strike's highlighted here because Gruul is a salvage archetype, so it's unlikely to not be generically powerful. It's good in the other red decks. Uh, I just think these cards are just universally quite good. It gives you a lot of options, super easy. So I really like the colors result. And then so this one's interesting. This was kind of a protection mechanism almost. I'll present the archetypes. I don't think there's a blue green archetype, just so we're clear. But the other ones, right? There are ways to build other archetypes. The concern I had was I didn't feel I could communicate them in a way that would make me comfortable with a teammate necessarily pulling it off unless they were already experienced enough to know what to do. So the problem was I would basically be endangering potentially people who are newer while not giving necessarily equity to the higher end drafters in the team. So that's why I kind of limited the information here. Like you could draft a Demir deck. It's like a Tempo Flash deck. Voracious Tom Skinner is amazing in it, but the problem is that it's quite difficult to draft. So yeah, I had this was kind of a protection floor. Unfortunately, there were other issues, right, as I mentioned earlier, so it didn't pan out. But yeah, so on these archetypes, blue green, like it just made more sense to be teamer. Like having access to that mid range package was just much better. Red white good cards. Technically, you could draft. I think Simon put a red white deck with like Cinder Strikes and the Tree Folks. Like it's fine. I mean, the thing is, like, apart from maybe Moonlit Lamenter, these cards are coming to you anyways, like, at the right time. They're good. People want them. So you're just playing really good red and white cards. You get some equity from Spiral into Solitude, but it's not that much. So, yeah. From here, these are the additional resources. So I'll be going a little faster. Again, pause if you feel you need to read them, but yeah. Big thing I was saying, we were having a lot of trouble. Anything a lot of the decks that were performing poorly in the house, you could identify they were playing cards that weren't fit for purpose. Like, oh, I needed this early drop, and I'm like, yeah, but what does it do in your deck? Well, it's a turn 2 play. I'm like, okay, so what happens if they play a 1 free? Oh, it does nothing. Right. So why are we playing this card? Um, it's just like a 2 power creature in the set is particularly poor unless it's a synergistic creature. You know, like the one that attacks to gain 2 life, or the lifelink one in elves that mills 2. Like unless you're talking about a 2 drop that does something, like yeah. The changelings are truly bad. Like there's very little redeeming features on them. There's some archetypes for mischievous sneakling, gangling, stompling. Like so the 2/2 in blue black, the 4/2 trampler in red green. To a degree, even that one's really bad. And I think the Grasspling's a reasonable BO free cyborg card and soup card. Um, but these lower the equity of your draft. Like they're just really, really bad. Like turn free playing a card with 2 power and no evasion is so bad. Like really atrocious. And yeah, Stalactite Dagger, we've kind of seen an effect like this in FF and in Avatar, right? You 2 mana, you make an artifact, you make a body, but normally it equips it. So it's already a 2 power creature. In this case, it doesn't. And that really makes the card atrocious. So unfortunately, the changelings, that's part of the problem of this set. The changelings are too soft, they're too weak. So you're not incentivized to draft them. I actually told the team, like, my first instinct upon seeing these would be to get rid of them in the deck. It doesn't mean they're like unplayable, to be clear. There are spots for them. I would just normally try not to. Caution comes we can go through, but like basically this was in the house. They were incorrectly labeled, so we were overrating Enraged Flamecaster, Swat Away, Fought with Charge, and Cool Earth Mystic. So I made sure to let them know don't overrate these cards. Like they're pretty poor. Get them like late maybe. Then I talk about low pick engines. So these are cards that like are lower pick order that you can get that helps. So like Midnight Tilly and Dawn Blessed Pennant are really 1-2 combo and elves that are nice, right? Maybe you have you have Tristan's Command or something, right? You can't get that with Midnight Tilly. Well, this Pennant can help. Merfolk, these two come late, right? The 1 free Vigilance and the 1 free Flyer. They're really good together. I mean, it's almost as if by design. But yeah, these two work really nicely together. Goblins, the prankster again, a bogger prankster. There we go. Is quite strong. But these two block tricks, they're not good in elves. We tried them in elves, and later I discovered that they weren't good and there. But Scarblade's Malice and Barb Bloodletter are really nice in the Goblins archetype because you're looking for some filler commons. Given the depth of the archetype isn't that high, and playing these allows you to punch through damage while maintaining board presence against what your opponent's doing. So they're quite good in the Goblin archetype as a result of that. The only thing that was noticed in our team, don't play Scarblade's Malice and Barb Bloodletter at the same time, since Wiver cuts Death Touch. That's a small thing. Kifkin, these are cards you get relatively late, good in the archetype, the free drop slot, so you can pretty much in Kifkin get all the free drops you want, to be honest. Rooftop Percher being a highlight again. Elementals. So the elementals, the 4 free that makes a treasure, the 6/5, they are very late picks, but they're super high equity in terms of win rate and improvement when drawn, and in terms of being open in the draft too, right? Like basic land cycling or making a treasure are like things you prize early in a draft because they give you options. So I didn't actually put them there because I felt that the Pro Tour it wouldn't happen. I was wrong. You might get those cards quite late, honestly. I think it's just the way the dynamics of the set work. You get these cards late, even in pack one. So Elementals gets a lot of good low pick options. Stratosaur is the big one because really only Elementals wants that card. Goblins was there, was a mistake in the slide. So card combos. We had Spry and Mighty a lot of the times. Not the best rare, but if you do have Spry and Mighty, I highly recommend it with Great Force Druid. Ahead of schedule, you really need that 0 power card. And then really to enable it to its fullest. Tam is a rare, one of the most overrated rares in the set. So what I said about this combo is it exists, but the truth is you probably will never do it because other people will rank Tam higher than you do. But it is really good with the Vivid cards, of course. So the reason Tam isn't that good is you have this dream, right, of like, I'm going to protect my cards from their removal. I'm going to get a ton of advantage. The truth. If your opponent has a ton of removal, they'll just use one of the extra removal spells on tap. It just acts as a standard bearer, lightning rod type card. Or they don't have much removal, and you're stuck with a 2/2 for 2. That's why the card's not great. But again, good with the Vivid cards here, right? The point down cards are cards that started well in the format, but then like over time weren't as good. Dawn Hand Dissident was a huge downswing, and then the other cards, as the other decks got more synergistic and more about that critical mass, random gaining life, buying time on the board cards were less useful because others knew what they were doing. And like those cards would be more in decks that weren't about anything. Then that was the same fate for Evershriek's Gift. I did know that Spry and Mighty was very much about its splititude combo rather than specifically being good or bad. These two cards went way up. The 2/4 Mystic was kind of not really playable at the start of the format. Now it is, especially if Elementals gets more contested. It's a pretty reliable free drop. And as more drafts have happened, more people have figured out how to make Kindle the Inner Flame work. There's obviously the combo of the rare, the 7 free, that's exceptional. But generally, even with the Mystic, like if you think about Kindle the Inner Flame, like that's a lot of damage coming through. So people have figured out the combos to generate a lot of value or a lot of damage. Then I looked at cards that perform worse or better in the hands of top players. So a lot of these are just straight up normal combat-ish creatures. Top players didn't perform as well with them. What they did perform well with, though, were these like dealing with the board cards in blue. Runaway Together, Aquatex Defenses, and Noggle Divine. So if you feel like quite strong compared to your the average opponent you're going to face, or even, to be honest, even one of the things of the Pro Tour wasn't like you're going to be better than your opponent. It's just you are going to understand how these cards work better. So you're going to put them in spots where they have that higher equity. So like I'd recommend you, if you haven't been playing with these or trying these, especially in best of free, to give them a shot. So I put a question mark here because a ton of the elves cards were worst in best of free draft in on arena. But unlike normal best of free, I was wondering if elves was a worst archetype or if it was something else. Like the Hans Mover was good on arena. I couldn't find the answer to the question. So what I did is present the information and warn the team to be cautious on it. I still think the elves deck is totally fine to draft. But yeah, Bristlebane Battler, Champions of the Perfect, Lissalana Dignitary, the Champion of the Path as well. That one's a bit weird here, but Morkan Size, Creekwood, Safe Right, Lewin, and Perfect Naturalist, Safe Right Cavalry, and Eclipse Elf. So like all elf cards. I wasn't sure why. And there was no rhyme or reason to really modify behavior as a result of these, but I presented the information for completeness. Then these came up as cards that are better in best of free, right? Requiting Hex, pretty poor, but post board, you know if you need it or not. Elder Auntie is a little bit of the same. Like, if you think about Silver Gill Mentor, it's quite good, but it costs 2 mana. Now, at free mana, making a 2/2 and a 1/1 depends a lot on what your opponent's doing in terms of its value. So that's conditional in the best of free gameplay. And then Furdok Core gets more value in best of free. The decks are less stable. You might need different creature types. So this comes up more. We're coming to the end here quickly. So bonus sheet cards. These are cards that are great. If I don't mention a bonus sheet card here, you can mostly ignore it unless you really want it. But Dolmen's Gate, Risen Reef, Goblin Sharpshooter, really, really strong. Specifically, Risen Reef mostly allows you to draw most of your deck. Dolmen's Gate and Goblin Sharpshooter allow you to dominate the board. These cards are good. They're not bombs. The Lords in the Lord in Elves and the Lord in Goblins are just good cards. And Bitter Blossom, it's really because creature stats have changed. Back when this card was first printed, making a 1/1 was at least half a card, a 1/1 flyer for that way. Whereas now, a lot less. It's much closer to Force Field with the way modern limited formats are. Then I talk about underrated cards. Again, I wasn't sure about the red creatures. It turns out they were underrated. I don't know if that'll be the case forevermore, but that was a thing. Flaming Cinder is really underrated for how powerful it is. As well as Gravegale Scoundrel and Wondervine Farewell. The Farewell, interestingly, doesn't fit in just Merfolk. There are some blue tempo aggressive archetypes you can draft that are... At the house, I had a blue-green deck that just started with 2 of the Bristlebane Battlers, so the one that became a 6/6 eventually, and just had Merfolk. So I just drafted green-blue aggro, and it was great in that deck. So, but it's underrated. You get it really late. And then Glenn Lenger's answer was the only underrated rare mythic. It's really relatively decent for what it is. And then I talk about Puka's Eye and Rooftop Percher. And Rooftop Percher ended up underrated at the Pro Tour. I got it really late, and it's a solid card. Then we're going to talk about overrated cards at common and uncommon. Grave Sifter, Recording Hex, Great Forest Druid, Feisty Spikeling, Stoic Grove Gride. I think for these slides, I'm going to go a bit faster. You can find this information on 17 Lands. You can look at data yourself and figure this stuff out. So I'm going to really go through these. Less commentary, whereas in Mythics, you should know they're not as great. Emptiness is being played, I suspect, in white decks. It is much better in the black decks. These cards are good, but they're not bombs, right? So people overrate them. They build their whole deck around them, but the equity from them is not high enough to justify blocking the archetype. Lewin and Mutable Explorer are totally fine, but Curel is obviously like taken by people who want to have fun, but it's not good. Oko is massively underrated. These cards are good, like you'd play them, just again, they're overrated. People pick them as bombs. Same thing here. Tam appears. 6 command again, very good, but overrated, right? And then we look at like I put Tam twice by accident. I didn't really mean it. And then Selfless, Safe Right, and Shadow Urchin are fine in the right archetypes, but again, they're just when you look at these cards, right? Whenever I look at overrated cards, I don't go that they're bad or good, right? That's not. I mean, obviously they're never bombs if they're overrated. But the big thing for me when putting these cards up is not you shouldn't play with these. It's because they are overrated, you gain more equity by giving them to opposition who will incorrectly rate them and give you equity as a result. So it's really about these cards giving you equity by their existence, but to fulfill that equity, you have to give them up, right? So overrated cards give you equity by making your opposition's decks and position weaker. Um, right? So that's why it's important to rate these cards correctly. Now, if you are at a table that somehow correctly valued these cards, then you take them at the right pick, because your opposition is essentially saying, oh, we're not going to fall for this, right? Yeah, that would have been it. For the underrated cards, it's the reverse, right? You take them at the position they should be taken, but they're gaining more equity, and you might get them for free, right? Sometimes very underrated cards you can just pass and let wheel, and that gives you equity from picks like pick 9, 10 that you should never be really having true equity in. Should be just filler level cards at the most. Um, so yeah, that's like the strategy for draft. Obviously sealed is super different, so that one's on your own if you are practicing sealed for spotlight, limited championship qualifiers, and other things. This was just draft. Of course, the Pro Tour is only in a best of 3 draft, so I adapted the presentation to that end. If you have questions, please contact me. I will probably be responsive on site at the Toronto Spotlight. You're always welcome to come and chat to me and ask questions. If you are contacting me online, it might be a bit slower until I get home next week, but there shouldn't be anything too important and limited this weekend if you're not at the Spotlight in Toronto, so there's more time. And the metagame will shift, right? This was the strategy for the Pro Tour. Again, in my opinion, probably like maintain the high ceiling standard, but didn't maintain the high floor standard. So that's really for me the biggest failing of this strategy is the floor standard wasn't there. So I'll make sure to have that floor standard in the future. Um, Last thing, Avatar I haven't shared. That's just a personal life thing. I just haven't had time. So we'll discuss Avatar in a couple of weeks from a proper stream perspective, since after Lorwyn, it's kind of, I mean, it's the small set for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so that's not as interesting to me, most likely. So we'll discuss Avatar for people who just care about the process for limited and just want to see what we did for World, since we performed quite well there. Um, and I think the strategy there had a highish floor. So we'll discuss it when we get to that. Thank you for listening. If you've been watching this, sorry I couldn't do the usual live thing, answering your questions and stuff live. But I hope this was still informative, enjoyable, useful to you, whatever you needed, wanted. Have a great day, all. Bye bye.